Terrific. So the recording is underway, and obviously, again, thank you very much for watching this Principles of Costings revision session. We're going to take a look at task 6 and task 7 in tonight's session, and we're going to start with task 6. That's going to really revolve around a couple of different things, such as inventory valuation, and then it might be something about sort of payroll as well, so working out basic wages, overtimes, piecework, again, these different things that you've seen throughout your studies. Okay, so let's start and actually get straight into this, because there's a few things to get through tonight, and let's see what we can manage. So we're told that SSN Limited is a wood burner service company and has the following stock movements for part number CC1971 into and out of the store for the month of February. So this is a bog standard inventory valuation question. We have our receipts and our costs for said receipts, and then of course we'll have an issue for a certain amount. We then need to work out what the cost of that issue is based on the inventory valuation method that we ultimately decide to use. Okay, so with that in mind, let's have a look at what we've got. We're asked, can we complete the below table for the issue on the 14th of February, which is of course this one here, enter the values to the nearest pound. So the value of the issue if we were using FIFO, and the value if we were using LIFO. So we'll start with first in, first out. Now, of course, remember, all this is just accounting fancy footwork. This isn't necessarily a physical rotation of stock. We're talking about the valuation methods here. So if we're using first in, first out, of course, we're saying that the first goods that came in will be the first goods that I value out in terms of my issues. So all I simply need to do is look at the dates and the receipts and say, okay, what was the first one in? The first one in will be the first one out. And you can see very clearly that we have that 1,500 units came in at £3,750, okay? And actually, I only need 1,375 units. So essentially, all I need to do is say, okay, I can very quickly fulfill everything I need based on the first issue. So all I do is, first of all, work out what the per unit cost is. So you do your £3,750 divided by 1,500, which I will just double check on my calculator just to make sure I don't make a fool of myself on the recordings, which of course comes to £2.50 per unit. So for the FIFO issue, we're issuing 1,375 units at a value of £2.50 per unit, giving me a total value of the issue, if we're rounding this up to the nearest pound, £3,438. Okay, so again, we've just worked out the oldest in stock, aka the first one in, is what I'm going to value out. I have enough to fulfill the issue on a single receipt, and I don't need to do anything extra than that at this point, which is really, really quite handy. Now, we can basically do the exact same again, and instead look at last in, first out. So of course, when we're using LIFO, we work in the opposite direction, don't we? So we're saying, using LIFO, the last goods that came in will be the first goods that go out. So we're just going to now do the exact same thing. We're going to look at this chronologically, but we're going to go from the latest to the oldest. So from the first one, the last ones in will be the first ones out. Now, don't forget, I'm not interested in this one here, dated the 28th of February. Why? Because the issue was on the 14th, which means that when I made this issue, this 950 units at £3,040, it didn't actually exist, did it? It didn't sort of register on our records at this point. It didn't exist. So what did exist was this one, first of all, the 9th of February, 750 units at £2,250 each. So we can say we have 750 units at 2,250. And of course, I now need to also work out how much I've got left over. So I need to keep going, don't I? How many units do I still need to fulfill? Well, looking at it, I've got about 625 units left. So I've cleared those off. I've used all of them. And if I'm continuing to apply LIFO, the last one in after this was 300 units at £975. So again, 300 units at £975. And again, I'll ask myself, okay, well, have I fulfilled everything in this order? No, I haven't. I'm actually still 300 units short, aren't I? So I can say, no problem. I've now used these for the valuation purposes. Let me go to the next one that will be the last one in at this point, which of course is the 1st of February, 1,500 units at 3,750. We've already established that that receipt comes to a cost of £2.50 per unit. So I'm going to do the £2.50 per unit. So for the remaining balance of stock, that 325 units, the price of £2.50 times 325. Giving me a total, we're adding all these different figures together, that gives me £812.50. Meaning that if I add the different valuations up one after another, 2,250, 975, £812.50, the value of the issue under LIFO would come to a total. We're rounding to the nearest pound, we're going to round that to £4,038. Okay, super duper. Now let's continue. So LIFO is an interesting one. Again, the different valuation methods that come up. LIFO isn't actually allowed, and up until very recently, I didn't actually believe it was examined in this exam. The course spec took it out, put it back in. So you learn something new every day yourself, don't you? Okay, so we're now going to complete the following statement. It's saying that the closing inventory has been valued at £5,977. The something has been used, the LIFO method or the FIFO method, I beg your pardon. And now we need to work out which one is which. Now, there's actually quite a decent way that we can do this, okay? Look at the value of the issues. So 3,438 and £4,038. We can basically say, okay, well, what was the total value of everything that had come in? So what we can do is we can take those costs less the issue, and that should equal the balance, shouldn't it? It's just makes sense, doesn't it, when we're sort of looking at that principle. So what did we actually have? So when we determined that the cost of that issue came through, so we're saying the closing inventory is £5,977. So it's just about rejigging the figures around. So you're trying to work out the balances without the actual balance columns present on your cost card or your inventory record card, I should say. So if we look at all of these different figures together, you've got your cost, 3,750. My highlighter works. Plus 975. Okay, so I'm just going to add all these up. Plus 2,250. Okay, and then equal to that, we're going to say plus 3,040. And then minus the cost of the issue. So the cost of the issue will be, of course, either 3,438 or £4,038. Now, if you punch all those figures into your calculator, I'm going to let you guys do that in your own time. Please do pause the recording if you need to. So you're adding all your costs up, then take off the different issues, see which one of those gives you the return answer of 5,977. You will find out that it is in fact LIFO. Again, you could just do it an easy way. I say an easy way. I think it's easier if they give you the balance columns here and you can just keep track of that in your own time. I think if anything, this way is a little bit more long-winded, but that is that. And there's only a tiny bit question, a tiny section of this question. Okay, so if we take a look at part B now, we're told that Carruthers Limited pays the direct labour workforce a time rate of £12 per hour, and that's for a standard 39-hour week. If any of the workforce work in excess of those 39 hours, an overtime rate of time and a quarter is paid. However, the company is also thinking of moving from a time rate system to a piecework system, paying £11 per unit. I was simply asked to complete all the calculations in the table provided below for Chris and Sue, essentially working out the wages, the premiums, or what their wage would be on the alternative piecework method. Now, a lot of this question is actually just relatively simple mathematics. We just need to make sure we put everything in the right order and pay attention to how we're being asked to record the overtime. So let's pick out that key information first of all. We know that the direct standard rate is £12 per hour for 39 hours in the week. Equal to that, we know that the overtime rate in excess of that is paid at time and a quarter. We'll work out the figures shortly. Now, equal to that, the piecework alternative pay method would be £11 per completed unit. Now, in terms of where you start this question, it doesn't necessarily matter because your figures should always be correct come the end of it. For the purposes of simplicity, we might as well actually start by just putting in what the piecework wages are, because we know how many units have been completed by Chris and Sue respectively, and we know that it comes to £11 per unit. So all we're going to do is plain and simply, for Chris, for example, 45 units times by £11, which of course comes to 495. And then we will do the exact same for Sue. 50 times £11 per unit completed, give me a total of 550. So it's just as straightforward to get that out of the way, isn't it? Now we can focus more on the actual hourly based salaries and see what we can discover. So we know that £12 is the standard rate. And we also know that if the overtime is paid at time and a quarter, we simply need to work out a quarter of 12. So we know that £3 on top of that would be our overtime premium. Meaning, of course, the overtime rate in total would be £15. So again, the actual maths of this is relatively straightforward. It's just important you make sure you know what the question is asking you to record. Are you being asked in this overtime column, for example? This is where we often see mistakes. Are you being asked to record the overtime premium, or are you asked to record the overtime rate? Depending on what the question is looking for, the remit in terms of the answer you need to give will change. So, for example, when we use that term overtime premium, we are specifically referring to the extra wage on top of the standard salary. So we know that the £12 is standard, and we know the £3 is the premium. And of course, we know that together it forms the rate. But the logic here is, if I'm asked to show premiums only, what this basically allows the individual to see is, okay, well, out of the, for example, 44 hours worked, how much of that was at the basic rate and how much of that was paid extra in overtime premium. So it's essentially just a way of showing the figures in a slightly different variation. I want to know how many hours did I pay for with the standard rate involved in that. Don't forget that any overtime worked will of course still include that standard element. So it's just essentially splitting the figures into different sections. We're saying, okay, we know how much overtime was paid, but out of the overtime paid, what was the actual premium on top of just standard working rates? So with that in mind, let's now have a quick go at this. So we're told that Chris works 39 hours. So his standard or basic wage will be, of course, 39 times the standard rate of £12, which, of course, gives us a total of £468. Now, for Chris's overtime, he actually doesn't earn anything because he only worked the 39 hours, so there is no overtime that actually needs to be accounted for here. What does need to be accounted for is the gross wages, which, straightforward enough, will just come to £468 because, of course, there's no other figures to include. Now let's use Sue and calculate her amounts. Now, again, don't forget, we're saying if we're asked to record the premium, it's only the premium element that I want to show in that column, aka out of the extra hours worked, what was the premium element paid on top of the standard rate that they also received. So when I'm working out this first basic wage column, I'm actually going to simply do the 44 hours times by £12, giving me a total of £528. So we're saying that for the 44 hours that Sue worked, £528 was paid at the basic rate of £12 per hour. We then need to work out what her overtime premium was. Now, if she worked 44 hours, and of course, the standard working week is 39 hours, she of course worked 5 hours of overtime. So all we simply need to do is take the premium element of £3 and times it by 5, giving us an overtime premium of £15. And finally, we can work out the gross wage received by doing 528 add 15, giving us that total £543. So can you see, when we're looking at Sue, for example, here, it's just a different way of expressing the figures. If you're asked to show the overtime rate, you would just take the £15 overtime rate and work out how many hours of overtime were actually worked. But because we're asked to record the premium, it is only the premium element the column wants to see. A very common mistake that we see, but just something that is very easily avoidable. Just make sure that when you're having a look at this, again, you are really understanding what are you asked to show. If we're showing the premium, all of the basic rate should be in the basic wage section, even for the overtime worked. We're trying to just work out what the premium on top of the standard working was due to that extra overtime. But with that, that actually concludes task 6. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at doing task 7 together. Okay, so task 7, we are going to practice it on spreadsheets. Okay, in your exam, you won't be doing it on an actual spreadsheet. So you won't be using, you won't be using Microsoft Excel in the exam. What you'll be doing is you'll be doing spreadsheet style skills on the assessment platform. Okay, so what we mean by that is the Atlas Cloud platform that you've used before in other exams. There will be like a little function thing on there that ties in with again, similar things. So it's not a direct replica. So again, what we're doing now, we can't really replicate it. We have to use Excel to get as close as possible. It's I don't know the best way of describing it. It's a bit of a weird way of putting it all together, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, it's just a case of practice on Excel. When you come to do the AAT mock exams, you'll see how this ties in with everything. Okay, so let's have a look at what I've actually got to do here. So we're told that Bricey Limited is a soft toy manufacturer. You have been provided with the following information in a spreadsheet. So we've got some budgeted information. We're going to basically do a variance analysis. Complete rows 15 to 19 in the table below, using formulas based on the information given. Monetary value should be to the nearest whole pound with 1,000 separators. Show negatives, so any sort of negative figures, as a minus or in brackets. So first of all, let's just do the easy bit. So we need to put the budgeted figures in, at which point I can then work out the actuals. I can then work out the variances based on the actuals. So for revenue, how would I work that out? Well, I'd say, okay, equals selling price per unit, simply multiplied by the amount of units sold. So B6 times B7. Press enter, 175,000. I'll add the separators and stuff in a little bit, guys, okay? I could actually might do it now, do them all at once, to be fair, because it says I'm doing it every time, doesn't it? There we go, and we'll just take the decimal places off too. Don't worry too much about the decimal places because it hasn't said specifically. I'm just going to take them off so the information looks tidy, okay? I've then got my direct materials costs. So I can see here that within my materials, I have 2,500 kilograms at £23. So cells B9 and D9 respectively. So I'm simply going to do equals materials D9, or B9, excuse me, multiplied by D9. Now, again, this is just relatively simple spreadsheet skills. You're not doing any crazy formulas here, okay? All you are doing is just multiplication. We'll probably do some addition and division. We don't have to do any like VLOOKUPs or anything too overzealous, okay? Now, for labour, we can do the same thing. We could say, okay, the labour hours that are in B10 and the rate per hour. So for direct labour equals 3,200 hours, which is B10, multiplied by D10, £17 per hour, gives me that figure of 54,400. And finally, production overheads. So when we're looking at production overheads, I've literally got the figure there. Now, what I'm not going to do is just put 28,000 there, because what I want to do is actually reference it to the cell directly. I want to use equals B8, just because on the off chance this figure changed, so like 30,000, for example, you notice that, of course, the relevant production overhead cell in the budget would change too. So that is why, even if you just bring in the information straight down, still have it like that, okay? Just reference the cell it relates to. And then I need to work out the profit and loss. So how do I do that? Well, I take my profit figure, so equals my revenue, B15, minus the sum that would equal B16 to B18. So basically minus my costs. So the revenue minus the costs, close my bracket and press enter. And what I will do very quickly is I'll just press show formulas here, just so you can see the different ones that we've done there. Again, you can pause the recording if you need to. So that's the first column done, pretty straightforward. Now, we can also do the exact same and work out the actual profit. And all I'm going to do is the exact same formula. So what I can do is just drag this box along like so. And you'll see that actually, when I double click on that cell box, it's now done the same thing for column C. C15, the revenue minus the different expenses, materials, labour and overheads equals my profit. So it's come out of that figure of 41,400. So again, it just saves you a little bit of time. Okay. Now what we need to do is work out the variances, which again is relatively simple maths. So for example, if I'm looking at the revenue, I'm going to say, okay, equals C15, which was the actual result for revenue, minus B15, which was the budgeted amount for revenue, gives me a total of 7,000. Now, don't forget, we do revenue the other way around because we want revenue to be higher than it is. So you'll see that isn't a minus figure because the actual figure is higher than the budgeted, which normally is a bad thing for costs. But this isn't a cost, is it? It's a revenue. Actually, I want this figure to be high as possible. So I'll do the variances one after another at the end. But for now, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's look at direct materials. And I'm going to say, okay, when I'm looking at this, my budgeted cost, 57,000 or 57,500 minus C16, 62,000. Gives me a figure of minus 4,500. And you can see it's a little small there, to be fair. I will zoom so you can see it. There is a minus sign on there. It's just that my screen's not incredibly big, I'm afraid. Terrific. And now what I can do is I can just take that figure and drag it down. So again, when you're doing this, all you're looking for is, again, I'll scroll in a little bit. You've got your little green or your little black box in the bottom right-hand corner of the cell. If you click and drag that down, you'll see that it will just paste the formula down, but on the new row. And now all we need to do is do profit. So profit will be the same as sales as well. So you'll actually start with the actual figure minus the budgeted figure, which means that we've made more profit than expected. Okay. Finally, last but not least, I need to work out the variances. Now, again, don't let Excel dissuade you. You've done this on a calculator 1,001 times. equals D15, so the variance itself, divided by, which I will express on Microsoft Excel using a forward slash, divided by the budgeted figure, which gives me a total which has come out as 0.04. However, we actually need to show this as a percentage, don't we? So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go across to home, and as you can see here, we've got a few different options. Format as a percentage, and look at that, it's now shown as so. Or what you can do is if you don't have these little options here, which you should do to be fair, you can just click on the drop down box. Again, you can change it to fit the specific format you want. So of course, you would just select the percentage option. And again, what I can do now is click that little box, and you can see when that is going to work because I've got a little black cross instead of my usual white cursor here. So I'm going to click on that and drag it down through the relevant cells, and you'll see that automatically, again, Excel has been very generous here, and it has pulled those formulas through for me. And again, I can check those just by double clicking, and yes, everything is there as intended. And what I will do as well is I'll just show the formulas so everybody can see those. And again, if you need to pause the recording at this point, that is absolutely fine. Finally, literally, last little thing and then we're done, guys. I told you this wasn't a huge one, was it? Identify whether the following variance is adverse or favourable. So the last thing it's asking us to say is, okay, the profit or loss variance is what? Is it adverse or is it favourable? And you'll see that I have an option for both. Now, as I'm looking at it, I'm saying that the profit figure should have been £35,100. The actual profit figure was 41,400. So the variance is favourable, isn't it? Again, don't get these mixed up with costs. Revenue and profit, if my actual revenue or my actual profit was better than what I expected it to be, good, that means it's favourable. I've made more profit than I've intended. If it was a cost, such as the direct materials, where the actual cost was higher than expected, then that would be adverse, okay? And you'll be thrilled to know, guys, that that is actually it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knock my screen back off and stop the recording there.